What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video I'm just going to be going over some weapons that will be really good to use in Grandmasters this season. If you didn't know, GMs come out tomorrow, so yeah, I just wanted to make a list of some weapons that you may want leveled up to 2000 for when the GMs release. And yeah, when I was making this video, I did not realize how many good weapons there are in the game. So it's going to be quite an exhaustive list, and you'll be like, wow, did this guy really just name every exotic and legendary in the game? And no, I didn't. It's just that there's lots of viable options now, which is good because it means you don't really need every single good weapon in the game to get through some GMs. But really quickly, here's the surges according to gm.report. So it's going to be Void Arc, Void Solar, Void Arc, and it basically just goes back and forth like that. So as far as I know, there'll be no Stasis or Strand. And so with that in mind, we're going to be looking at mostly Void, Arc, and Solar options. So I'm going to start this video with exotics. And there, like I said, there's a lot of viable exotics, and I'll kind of just say which ones I think will be the best. So I guess before we go through everything, I do want to talk about the weapons that have barrier stunning capabilities. Champion stunning capabilities. So we've got Overload Sword. That's our only heavy option for a champion stunner. And then we have Anti-Barrier Pulse, Unstoppable Sidearm, Unstoppable Scout, Overload Hand Cannon, and Anti-Barrier SMG. So right off the bat, SMGs are not in a great place in PvE right now, in my opinion. So for anti-barrier, I'm mostly going to be sticking with pulse rifles. The other thing is sidearms require being pretty up close and personal. So if you're not used to that playstyle, then I definitely recommend Unstoppable Scouts. And with that in mind, I'm mostly going to be sticking to, well, you'll see in the video. And then Overload Hand Cannons, I've got some advice there as well, but hand cannons are in a really good place in PvE right now. So let's jump into it. Succession is usually just generally good, and then the Palindrome, you can't get this anymore, but it's very good with Subsistence 1 for All, and it pairs nicely with Expanding Abyss and all the Void stuff on the artifact this season. But yeah, now let's look at the exotics. So the first one we have is Bad Juju. I love Bad Juju. It's in a very good place right now. It's hitting incredibly hard. Especially when you get String of Curses going. So if there's a Nightfall with lots of like lower tier trash ads, like little Curse Thrall or something, String of Curses just goes super hard, gives you massive super energy, and it reloads itself, so that's very good. Many of you may not have Euphony, but it is very strong for a special option, so I did want to include it, even though it is Strand, and there's nothing overloading it, so it's just intrinsically not going to get 25% because we don't have a Strand Surge. But it is a strong weapon. Final warning, I am including this as a sidearm option because it just hits so damn hard, and I've heard it hits even harder with the Catalyst done, and we have Unstoppable Sidearm, so it's one of the few sidearms that I actually do recommend. Necrochasm is a great ad clear weapon, and I did just want to include it. Even though we don't have auto rifles on here, this thing is in a really good spot. Arbalist, it's fallen out of favor, especially since the loss of Match Game, but it is good at one-shotting barrier champs, or not like the champ, but the shield. Wish Ender also does that, so I would argue Wish Ender is just better because it's a primary versus a special. So definitely Wish Ender is always good. It kind of fell out of favor last season because of all the Radiant on the artifact, but yeah, Wish Ender is always strong. Outbreak Perfected. This one is in such a good place. I've ran a couple Master Nightfalls with it, and it feels incredibly good. So definitely go get Outbreak and level it up if you haven't. Actually, this is just one I pulled. This isn't my craftable one, so I could delete this. But anyways, it's craftable now, so get that. Osteostriga is one of the very few SMGs that I'm going to be recommending. We do have Anti-Barrier SMG, and Striga has been nerfed. And even with the nerf, it is still a very good damage over time weapon. So I thought I would include it. And speaking of damage over time, Witherhoard, again, not featured on the artifact, but it is just always a strong play. You can see I have 20,000 kills with this, 12,000. Those are some of my highest options. Like I use a lot of different weapons. So for me to be over 10,000 on a weapon is a lot for me. So yes, very strong weapons. But Outbreak, going to be really, really good, especially in team GMs. It does great damage for a primary, even solo, but even better if all your fire team's running it. And because it's primary, it gives a lot of super energy back. And it's good for ammo economy because it can actually deal some pretty good damage as a primary. So you're not so forced into using special and heavy on things like champions. So now we go here. Red Death, again, pulse rifles, they got a huge buff with Final Shape. They're in a really good spot, and Red Death cures you on kill. Yeah, final blows with this weapon cure you. So yeah, it's just very, very strong for survivability. Telesto I just had on here. The only reason I kind of have it is because it's void. So depending on the build you're running, it could be good. But yeah, that's kind of a fringe one. Mostly on here just because it's void. Collective Obligation is super, super good. Very, very strong. Definitely recommend running this season. It can spread weaken, volatile, and suppression. Wave Splitter, super strong, but it is a special that you kind of have to use as a primary. So you do want your teammates to be running like special finisher and stuff, but it is hitting incredibly hard in Final Shape. Buried Bloodline, one of the best specials in the game. It's got Unstoppable Sidearm. It can give you Devour on any class. It weakens when you have Devour. Weaken works with Expanding Abyss. So yeah, Buried Bloodline, definitely one of the best weapons to run in GMs this season. Still Hunt I included just because it's so popular with Celestial Goldie. So if you're running Celestial Goldie, especially on a Solar Surge week, this is extremely strong. Sunshot, again, what more can you say about Sunshot? And with Overload Hand Cannon, so I was going to get into this at some point. So things with explosive payload or time payload will stun an overload in less shots. And that's very, very valuable because things like Overload Minotaurs and Captains always blink around. So Sunshot gets added benefit there because it's got explosive rounds. Graviton Lance, extremely good weapon. It's even got Vorpal Weapon on it, Turnabout. Like, this thing has had so many buffs. And it didn't actually receive one of the buffs in Final Shape, like the general pulse rifle buff, Escaped Revision 0 and it, but it's still extremely strong. And speaking of Revision 0, I did forget to send that over. Actually, I think it's on my other character. I have 2 characters of exotic weapons that you can use. And then Trespasser, again, this requires you to play closer, but man, I was running this in day 1 raid on the 4th encounter, and it was just absolutely shredding through ads. And this week it was Arc Surge, and when you have Unrepentant going, if you hit your crits, you can one-shot the knights in Verity, and you can almost one-shot the ogres that spawn in Verity. Not the unstop ogres, but the other ones. So Trespasser is crazy good. And if you had like a Devour build where you can be aggressive, then this is just going to chew through ads, and it's going to get you lots of orbs with like Arc Siphon. So don't sleep on Trespasser. People really forget about this weapon. You can see I have 2,500 kills. I've always liked it. And for some reason it just flies under the radar. But yeah, it is Unstoppable Sidearm. So keep an eye out for Trespasser. It's very, very good. But again, not good at distance. So if you're not used to being aggressive, stay away. Leviathan's Breath. Speaking of, much like Graviton Lance, this thing has just got buff after buff. I love Leviathan's Breath. It's so good. And this season, it's probably the strongest it'll ever be, thanks to Expanding Abyss. So if you weaken something, then it's going to do 25% more damage instead of 15% more damage. So yeah, Levi's Breath, plus it's got Intrinsic Unstoppable. This thing is absolutely cooking this season. Thunderlord, Arc Surge weeks, this is going to be very, very good. It stuns Overload champs in one shot. And I was doing Master Law Sectors, and I actually had to use Thunderlord because the thing that was the toughest for me was an Overload champion in the boss room, and this thing allowed me to kill it in one stun at like a GM power delta. So yeah, Thunderlord, very, very strong, good ammo economy, good for champs, good for ad clear. And if you remember on Arc, I can't remember what the fragment is, but it used to say like when amplified you can blind, basically your special weapons can blind enemies. Now it's special and heavy weapons. So if you happen to be on an Arc subclass, though most people are running Prismatic these days, Thunderlord's gonna be even better. So yeah, very strong there. Microcosm, I'm just throwing this on here because I'm curious how it's going to stack up. Right now it hasn't been able to really benefit from surges and things like raids and dungeons. So yeah, just one that I'm just curious about, so I threw it on here. Dragon's Breath, again, any damage over time weapon, super strong. This thing is just a monster. It's just always good. Heart Shadow, so these next two, Heart Shadow and Black Talon, are on the list if you're running like Overload Sword, Blade Stamina, Argent Blade. If you are more of an experienced Grandmaster runner and you just want to run something that's strong but like aggressive and you know how to play aggressively, then these 3 artifact mods will really benefit these 2 weapons, plus Expanding Abyss. Whoops. Again, this is very build dependent, these ones, but they could be very good. And then Deterministic Chaos, it can spread weaken, it volatiles, and now it got Barrier Champions. I actually had this on my top 10 list of the worst exotics in Destiny 2. So I still don't know how great it will be because things like Hammerhead and Commemoration exist. But yeah, I'm curious about it, and because Void is so featured in the artifact, I do think it could be good. So yeah, something to keep an eye on there. Truth, it got a buff as well. The big thing with it is it's Void and it can fire 3 rockets. So even if you were in like a solo GM, the problem is ammo economy, which it did get a buff to its reserves, but even still, it's going to be able to hit very hard burst damage because it can shoot 3 grenades or 3 rockets in 1 stun. And then Deathbringer, same type of thing, mostly on here because it's Void. It hasn't had a lot of playtime that I've seen, but this thing does hit very hard. And if there's some GMs with like a ton of ads, this thing is great for ad clear. So I just wanted to include it because yeah, it sometimes gets overlooked. So we actually have a lot more exotics to get through. Sorry if this video is very long. I'm including Bastion on here just because it was buffed, and basically it will allow you to deal more damage after melees and make your melees deal more damage when you do damage with it, and it can intrinsically stun unstops. So again, depending on your build, this could be a fun option for like an easier GM maybe. Forerunner, very good against Tormentors, so any GMs that have a Tormentor, this is going to be great, and it's got Unstoppable Sidearm. I've been using it a lot in the 3rd encounter of the raid. No time to explain, I'm just putting on here just because Pulse Rifle's got such a strong buff, so I figured I would include it, and they're anti-barrier. Same with Vigilance Wing. I don't think these are like amazing weapons, but they have artifact synergy, and Pulse Rifles are just in a very good place. Wicked Implement, it's a scout rifle, so it's got Unstoppable Scout, and it can slow and freeze, so it can also deal with overloads with the slow, so that's very cool. Thorn is excellent with Overload Hand Cannon. I actually ran it a couple seasons ago. So like last season we had Unstoppable Hand Cannon, I think it was, but the season before that we had Overload, and Thorn with its damage over time really helps to keep overloads overloaded. So yeah, Thorn, very good. Revision 0. Some people hate on this weapon, I'm not sure why, but with Vorpal and 4th times, especially as a solo player, this thing shreds through red bars with the 2-burst fire, and then once you stun a champion and switch to that sniper mode, you can kill a champion in 1 stun with your primary, which there's not very many that can do that. One other weapon that does have the potential to do that though is Malfeasance if you're running Lucky Pants. So like I said, these weapons are in a good place as it is. I don't think it will work with Overload, because as you stack the burrows or the slugs or whatever that burrow into the combatants, that's what actually stuns the unstop. In the past, this has had dual functionality, but that got patched. I haven't tested it, so I doubt it would work with Overload, but let me know down below if you know if it does. Either way, it does work on Unstoppables, and it's very good with Lucky Pants. And then Kvasov I just threw on here just because I just quite like Kvasov, but much like Necrochasm, they feel good, but they don't have any artifact synergy, so you're probably not going to run it. Onto the specials. Everyone's kind of sick of Polaris Lance, I feel like, but on solar weeks with unstoppable. It's still a strong option, so I did want to include it. Le Monarch, oh man, this thing, I have a build in mind with this, and yeah, this thing is a monster. Stuns overload champions. I've used it in solo GMs in the past, and it one-shots red bars, which is very, very valuable in GMs. Spreads poison. This thing is just getting even stronger with all the void synergy on the artifact. So yeah, Le Monarch, I'm gonna level that baby up right away because it's very good. Ariana's Vow, again, it's got intrinsic anti-barrier, so I highly doubt it would work with Overload, but I did just want to point that out. But it did get a buff where when you pierce a shield, so breaking a match shield, so a solar shield as well, or piercing a champion's barrier will cause the target to ignite. So ignitions are very, very good, especially depending on your build. So that's nice. Even on Prismatic, there is one thing that like causes your shatters and ignitions to have bigger AoE, I think it is. So yeah, there's even some Prismatic synergy there. So yeah, I would love if Ariana's Vow was good again because it's been a long time. And then Risk Runner, again, it's one of the few SMGs that I'm saying that may be valuable because if there's a lot of arc damage, this can actually really keep you alive. I used it in day 1 Deepstone Crypt back in the day, and it was really helping to keep me alive. So yeah, Risk Runner is a nice option. And Teraba, again, this is more if you're used to playing aggressively, but on like a Solar Singe week, I guess it doesn't even have to be Solar Surge. Anything, if you didn't know, and I know this, so I shouldn't have been talking like that, but basically, pulse rifles are always overcharged when that modifier is active. So as long as you have anti-barrier pulse, even if it was a stasis pulse and there's no stasis surge, it's going to benefit from that overcharge. So this doesn't even have to be used on Solar Week. As long as you're running anti-barrier SMG, it's going to get that 25% damage increase. And this is another one where it's like a primary that can deal a shit ton of damage. And I haven't even used it much. So if I'm running with friends, I don't think I would use it in a solo GM just because, yeah, SMGs, you still have to be so close. But with friends, I think this could be really fun to run. So I might actually give that a try at some point this season if we're like farming a GM for a certain weapon or something. Then on to here, Anarchy. It's obviously got nerfed, but with its damage over time and yeah, just depending on your build and if it was an Arc Surge, this thing could still be really good. Grand Overture, a lot of people don't know this because it doesn't really say it. Jeez. Right there. Missile explosions will blind combatants. Those defeated by missile impacts then explode. So this actually has blind, which can blind unstoppable champions, so it can stun them. And blind is also just very, very strong. This has amazing ammo reserves, good total damage, so decent ad clear. It's very annoying to shoot, but I can't deny its strength. So again, if it was an Arc Surge week, definitely something you could run. Galley, I don't have much to say on it. Everyone knows how good it is. Lament, it has been nerfed, so I'm curious about this, but I've definitely used it in GMs in the past. It's a very strong weapon. It can pierce barrier shields, so I just love Lament, so I wanted to include it. Whisper, again, no artifact synergy. Like last season, it was so good because you could just get Radiant in one shot with it, and then it could pierce barriers. But again, depending on the GM, maybe you need some long-range damage. It is a very strong weapon. Xenophage is very good for certain things, especially on things like Threshers. So if there was a GM with Threshers, it's very good on stuff like that. So just a great utility weapon. I love Xenophage. The Queenbreaker. This one, I did solo Lake of Shadows GM with last season. Only because it can blind on hit. And I needed the blinding in the boss room, so it was actually valuable for that, but it did get a reserve buff and a damage buff in Final Shape. So on an arc week, again, there was no arc on the surges last season, but yeah, so on an arc week between the buffs to it and whatever, this actually could have some play. So yeah, maybe keep an eye on it. Another one I don't have on here is like Darcy. It can spread Jolt, which Jolt is very good on overloads. So maybe I should have included that on this list. So just another one to consider. 1000 Voices. I'm very just curious about this one more than anything. And then Parasite. It's great for like just immediately deleting champions and stuff. So yeah, these ones I just thought I would include. So that's pretty much it for the exotics. I do want to talk about Doom of Chelchis. So my role has explosive payload and frenzy, which is like an awesome role, and it's unstoppable and it's void. So this is like one of the few legendary scouts. I don't recommend very many legendary scouts because I don't feel they're that strong, but if there is a GM where you have to play back and be safe, like with this build, it would actually pair really well, to be honest. So that's one legendary scout option that could be good. And I also did want to include Lingering Dread. I just kind of wanted to talk about this one. So disorienting grenades, any GL with disorienting is very good in high-end content, because disorienting just like keeps enemies from shooting you for a brief time, so it can keep you alive. And then Chill Clip I wanted to talk about. So it can slow, which deals with overloads, and then it can freeze in 2 shots. It used to take 3 because they nerfed Chill Clip as a whole because Riptide was a problem, but then in Final Shape they just nerfed rapid fire fusion rifles that have Chill Clip. So that was the nerf, but it basically was only targeting Riptide. So now this can deal with 2 champion types and it can disorient enemies. And yeah, it's a very tough role to get. I got very lucky. But yeah, I just did want to point out the utility of these. I know they're not anywhere on the artifact, like there's no unstoppable GL, but they do have good utility. And with like Prismatic and all these subclass verbs that can deal with champions, you don't always need all 3 weapons. And I mean, most GMs only have 2 types of champions anyways. But what I'm saying is, yeah, you can absolutely run a couple utility options and just get by with using your abilities to stun champions. So now I'll get into the legendary weapons that I recommend. Alright, so now for my legendary weapons. So the first one is a world drop. It's the Battle Scar. Mine has Shoot to Loot Kinetic Tremors, which as far as I'm concerned is the God roll. I've actually got a few of these over the years. That's why it only shows 746 enemies defeated, because this roll was just better than the other one I had. I like Flared Magwell a lot, so I deleted that one. But anyways, I've used this a lot and it's very good. I think last season it was Overload Pulse, so I was using it in I know I used it in Birthplace of the Vile anyways. So yeah, it's an excellent weapon. Hung Jury, another scout rifle that I would recommend. There's a Brave version. This isn't the Brave version, but the Brave version has very good rolls. Again, I'm a big Shoot to Loot Kinetic Tremors fan, as you can see, but this has a lot of good rolls. Riptide I already talked about, the nerf to it, so this would take 3 shots to freeze an enemy. So now I want to point out Deliverance is able to slow on the first shot, and then on the second shot it would freeze. It is a 740 charge time, so it is a little slower, but still it can freeze in 2 shots. So again, more of a utility weapon. And then Mountaintop. So I kind of talked about Anarchy. We did Birthplace of the Vile last season, me and my friends Ark and Time Lord, and we used Anarchy, Mountaintop, Recluse, and just used our abilities to stun the champions and stuff. And Mountaintop was actually putting in work, so it's actually very good, and I like it. So if there's something like Briggs in one of the GMs, or much like Xenophage, it's very good on, yeah, things like constructs or whatever, like Threshers, Briggs, things like that, because it deals explosive damage and doesn't rely on precision. So yeah, Mountaintop, very strong. Other weapons that are very good in that same vein, like on Threshers and stuff, are these rocket-assisted frame sidearms. So the Call, I've crafted this one with Demo and Vorpal. So this is kind of like my GM one because it's got utility perk and Demolitionist, and then Vorpal Weapon for dealing with unstoppable champions with Unstoppable Sidearm, or just any champions, because it's consistent. Where Lead from Gold 1 for All is also a super good roll. Again, I deleted one because this was actually a better roll, but I was using Lead from Gold 1 for All a whole bunch since the expansion, and I absolutely love it. So in a certain GM, if I was leaving a lot of red bars one shot, I would actually, like with this one, I would maybe run the 1 for All one because it's going to save me ammo once I get 1 for All procced. But yeah, it really depends on the enemy types and the GMs. But either way, get yourself a Call. It's a very good weapon. Warden's Law, this is mostly for Lucky Pants, Enlightened Action, Vorpal, 22 in the mag. You can run backup mag now, so that I can go up to 28. Put Accurize on that, go back to 22. But yeah, this is a very good roll. Midnight Coup. So I talked about explosive payload and timed payload, how they're very good for overload champions. So as far as I'm concerned, this is the best GM role you could get, explosive payload 1 for all. It's going to give you an easy damage boost, which can be procced from the explosive payload shot. So yeah, Midnight Coup, very, very good. So is Fatebringer, just hand cannons in general. And then Aegir Scepter, I guess I could include it too. Though, again, there's no Stasis Surge and it doesn't get any overcharge, but it's just a really fun gun, so I like including it. Indebted Kindness, Lead from Gold Volt Shot. This thing is an absolute monster. Yeah, not much more needs to be said about it. It can do Unstop with Unstoppable Sidearm, and then it can handle overloads with Volt Shot. So it's just excellent. One of my favorite weapons, 5,300 kills. And yeah, I just love it. Speaking of Volt Shot, a hand cannon. So you got AoE, and then you can spread more like AoE damage with Volt Shot, deal with overloads easier because you got overload hand cannon, and then yeah, if you jolt it. So yeah, that's very nice. No hesitation, I wanted to include, I've got like the total healer support role. Basically, if you don't know how this weapon works, just kind of look it up or play around with it. But this just allows you to be a healer for your team. So I wanted to include it in case you're looking at like team-based builds. Avoid Pulse Rifle. This one is actually going to be exceptionally good on barrier champions because Under Over deals extra damage to combatant shields. And then Frenzy is just one of my favorite perks in the game, and armor piercing rounds. So I just had to keep that role literally just for the utility. So it's obviously going to pair really nicely because of Expanding Abyss and stuff. So on certain Void builds of mine, this is going to be a monster. As you can see, I have no kills on it, but I do know it will be good. However the hell you say this hand cannon, it's one of those 2-burst heavy bursts like Warden's Law. But again, mostly just because it's Void, and I believe it's a world drop. So yeah, Unrelenting Golden Tricorn. Like Golden Tricorn is quite nice. Because it's a big damage boost and it's very easy to proc in today's sandbox with all the ability kills that we can get. And then Cantata, I'm including that just to show a timed payload option. And then I also have a 7 Seraph hand cannon with timed payload that I didn't include here, but yeah, because it's a 180, that's kind of like the best for overload hand cannons, where most of the hand cannons I've shown are 140s. But yeah, whatever you want to run. And then Zali's Bane, same type of thing. Explosive payload, 1 for all. Very, very good. And then I just included a Solar Pulse. This one's from the raid, but you could get like a BXR Battler or whatever you want to run. Again, it's just nice for anti-barrier pulse. And then I included a Heliocentric just because it is a very strong sidearm. And I wanted to include like some legendary sidearm option for you if you wanted to run that instead of a scout rifle. So I did want like some legendary options of everything. And then for SMGs, I didn't, just because I do think SMGs are in such a bad place. But there are a few good SMGs that you could run if you wanted to. And then lastly, for the heavies, you can see I have this Wendigo already leveled up to 2000. This is the OG. It's very unique because it's the only heavy grenade launcher that can roll with disorienting grenades, at least as of now. And then it gets auto-loading explosive light. So it's very, very strong. I've been running it in the Verity encounter in the raid, and it's very good. Falling Guillotine, obviously I'm including that because of all the sword stuff, but whatever sword that you like. False Idols is from the Pale Heart. It's a solar option, so on like a solar week, but I just included a Void one because Void week seems to be every week according to GM.report. A good rocket launcher, so Apex Predator I included. And then a Crux Termination for Arc Week, and a Braytech Osprey for Void all the time. Again, just wanted to include some rockets because they are very good at quickly deleting champions. And then I wanted to include some machine guns as well because they're very good for ad clear. So Song of Your Ute is from the Crota's End raid. Commemoration is from Deepstone Crypt. I actually didn't include a solar one, but there are some good solar options. I love Fixed Odds, but I used it a ton last season. Hammerhead you can get as a brave weapon or whatever from Onslaught. And yeah, then the last one is Edge Transit, which you can also get from Onslaught. Envious Assassin Bait and Switch is very, very strong, and it gets even stronger with Expanding Abyss. So yeah, I did not expect this video to be that long. Like I said, turns out there's a ton of good weapons, and yeah, if you have any of those, they're going to be more than viable, and even lots that you may have that I didn't include. on this list will still be viable. But yeah, Rocket Sidearms I think is the way to go for Unstop rather than something like a Legendary Sidearm, or like I did mention Trespasser and Final Warning, but even still, if you're not used to playing aggressively but you need Unstop, just try to use one of these special sidearms because they're great. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. I hope it was helpful and informative, and if it was, then a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. And if you're still watching, then thanks for watching to the end. It means a lot. Take care.